Hi, so today we're going to be looking at a pattern. The pattern that we're going to be looking at is called matchstick pattern, which I have demonstrated here to my left. What we're going to be doing is creating an algebraic rule for the pattern. So, what our goal is from this lesson is to find our rule. And we're going to put it right down here. In order to do this, we need to create a table. What we're going to be looking at is the number of squares and the number of toothpicks. So let's go ahead and fill in our table. Here we have 1 square, here we have 2 squares, and here we have 1, 2, 3 squares. So for my first square, we have 1, 2, 3, 4 toothpicks. For 2 squares, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 toothpicks. And then for 3 squares, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And what I can see by looking at my numbers on the right is that they seem to be going up by 3. Because I know that 4 plus 3 equals 7, and that 7 plus 3 equals 10. So my pattern that I see here, they're going up by 3. They're increasing by 3. So what I want us to do, I want to know how many toothpicks there would be if I had 4 squares. So if I went and did the next term of our pattern, what it would be. So in that case it would be 4. Let's see. If I know we're increasing by 3, I know that 10 plus 3 is 13. So there must be 13 toothpicks in 4 squares. So I can keep doing that. I know that if I keep adding 3 each time, this will tell me how many toothpicks I have. But my goal was to find a rule. And the reason that I want to find this rule is because what if I had the number 20? In order to find the 20, how many toothpicks there would be in 20 squares, I would have to know 19 squares and I would have to know 18 squares because I can't just jump straight to 20. So if I find a rule to how I can find how many toothpicks there are in so many squares, this will make it easier for me because then I just know that I can put in 20 and find out how many toothpicks there are. So in order for me to find this rule, which will make it easier for me, I know that I need to break up 4. And to do this, I'm thinking that I can do 1 plus 3 because I know that 1 plus 3 gives me 4. And I didn't just choose this number because I wanted to. I started to see, or I'm beginning to see that 1 plus 3 plus another 3 gives me 7. So I know that 1 plus 3 plus another 3 gives me 7. And that 1 plus 3 plus 3 plus 3 gives me 10. I'm starting to see a rule. And I see that we're beginning to increase by 3s. You know what else I see? I see that we have groups of 3 here. So I'm going to go ahead and write this out as if I had groups. So I have 1 group of 3 plus my 1. And then here I have 2 groups, because I have 2 of them, of 3 plus my 1. And here I have 3 groups of 3 plus 1. And when I hear groups, I know that that means multiplication. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this mathematical concept that I am very comfortable with. And so I'm going to go ahead and transform and write these groupings into multiplication problems. So I know that 3 times 1 is the same as one group of 3. I'm going to add my 1. Then I'm going to do 2 groups of these 3 plus 1. And then here I have 3 groups of my 3 plus 1. And what I'm beginning to notice is that these numbers, they seem to match my numbers of squares. So I'm going to go ahead and write that with S representing the number of squares. Because if I know that these are the same as the squares, then I can represent it as S because they're the same. So know that this equals 3 plus S, or I'm sorry, times S, because we're multiplying because it's groups, plus 1. And this was 3 times squares, because I had 2 squares, plus 1. So I can write that the same way, 3 times the number of squares plus 1. And here I have 3 squares times 3 plus 1. So I can write that the same way. 3 number of squares plus 1. I'm sorry, 3 times the number of squares plus 1. So I have now created my rule. I know that I can plug in any number of squares and find out how many toothpicks are in those squares. But before I write it down here, to make sure that I'm 100% correct, I'm going to check my answer. And I'm going to check my answer using this 4, which we found out earlier. So I know that if this is correct, that 3 times 4, because that's the number of squares, plus 1 should equal 13. So let's check it. 4 times 3 is 12, plus 1 equals 13. So I know that's right. So now that I know that my rule is correct, I'm going to go ahead and write at the bottom. I've found my rule. 3 times the number of squares plus 1 will give me the number of toothpicks, which I'm going to represent as T. So now that we have found our rule, let's go ahead and figure out how many toothpicks there would be in 20 squares. So in order to do that, I just need to put in 20 as my S. So I have 3 times 20, because that's the number that we are wanting to find, plus 1 will give me how many toothpicks there are. So I know that 20 times 3 is 60, plus 1 is 61. So using my rule, I could figure out how many toothpicks are in 20 squares without counting plus 3, plus 3, plus 3, as I go down all the way to 20. And this is the reason that we use rules. This is why it's very important, because it makes it easier. It makes it easier for us to find how many squares, or I'm sorry, how many toothpicks are in the number of squares that we want to find. So that is how you figure out the rule for a match point pattern. In this case, was 3S plus 1 will give us the number of toothpicks. This lesson can be used, or is age appropriate, for 4th grade. Kids start learning patterns beginning in kindergarten, but there shouldn't be a rule that's created until they truly understand patterns. So that would be about grade fourth grade. Thank you so much.